Hi everyone and welcome to another video. I'm Lauren and in this video I want to discuss the books that I have read in the month of October. Now two I won't treat in this video because they're for my reading around the world / invisibility project. So you're gonna have to look out for that. The books that I will talk about in that video are Slash and Burn by Claudia Hernandez that I finally finished. Really like this one, so I read the French translation, which is the Friche Coupe Brûle, and read this one for El Salvador. And I also read The Colony by Audrey McGee, which was longlisted for the Booker Prize, and I read that one. It's set in Ireland, so that's why I'm grouping it in my Invisible Cities / Reading Around the World project. Now, I had one DNF this month, and that is Fictions by Jorge Borges. He's an Argentinian writer, and these are short stories. Not usually my cup of tea, but when they're by the same writer, I'm finding that at least that's better. But this one was hard to read. It was work. The short stories, they don't have a lot of narrative. It's more about people finding books or describing thought processes or weird things going on. So I missed plot and characters. There's just no plot and no characters was what I thought. So the reason I was reading this is because my book club had picked it up. However, the physical book itself arrived to me rather late. So I'd started reading it on with an ebook, but again started too late, and this, because it's work, I just didn't have enough time. I think it's a good book though that expands your reading mind, so for that I would have been interested in working through it, but now that I wasn't able to finish it in time for my book club, I'm not sure I'm going to pick it up again, which is, at least I stopped reading it the moment I realized that it was really not going to work. It was just too much work for those days as well. I also can't say I got along with the writing style. It was very heavy-handed, and I started at the ebook and I started that in English, and I thought maybe with French it's going to be better because the heavy-handedness might become a little bit more flowy, but still didn't really like the writing as well. I'm going to semi-hold on to it. I'm going to give this book to my mother, because then it's not on my shelves, because I'm not gonna like having this on my shelves, but it will still be kind of, if one day I think, oh, let me have a crack at it again, then I might be able to grab it from her again. I think she was going to like it, so that's that. I'd be curious what you thought of this. I haven't heard a lot of people telling me why they loved it, the people that loved it, so would love to hear your thoughts if you've read this one. One of the books that I've read this month is Vous, haine by Antoine Leiris. It's a very short book, it's non-fiction, and in this one, Antoine Leiris describes his thoughts in the aftermath of the Bataclan terrorism attacks that happened in Paris in 2015. Now, those attacks were coordinated attacks, and the most people died in the Bataclan, which is a concert hall, and one of those people is Antoine Leiris' wife. So in this book, he describes discovering that the terrorism attacks are happening, discovering that his wife has died, having to tell that to their child. They have a 17-month-old boy, and just the days afterwards. Now, he also wrote a letter that went viral, and that is also one of the things that he doesn't describe it a lot in this book, but there's a movie that is coming out right about now, and in that movie you see the effect of that letter also a little bit more, in him having to go to all of these talk shows and the effect that has on his family. Now, the letter that he wrote is called Vous, haine, which is the same title as the book, and in that letter he talks to the terrorists saying, "You will not have my hate. You have taken the life of my wife and of all of these other people, but I'm not going to hate you. You're not worth that. I'm just going to continue living with this hole, but I'm not going to hate you. You're not worth that." This book, because it's about the aftermath of this terrible event and him grieving his wife and seeing that his child is grieving his mother and feeling inadequate, also not knowing how to raise his child on his own, there are a lot of hard to read parts and parts that will just are gut-wrenching. Especially one that comes to mind is when he tells his son that his mother is not coming back. There are beautiful parts as well where they become this group of two that are going to fight the world, but at the same time, he's not necessarily a very likable person. He's rather harsh, and the way he treats his family is not always very nice. And yes, he's grieving, so everybody grieves in a different way. But even with that, he's still this, I don't know, French intellectual. There are a lot of parts of him that just, yeah, not necessarily a nice person. I would recommend reading the book and also watching the movie. They're complementary, so that was very interesting. Yeah, and the grief comes across in this one, and I think it's interesting to a lot of these things with terrorism attack. The focus is then put on the terrorism, and now you see there's focus on a person who stays behind and a child who stays behind and this group around, and how what I also found interesting is seeing how the people around him reacted to him having such an experience and him then reacting to that. So the mothers in the place where his son goes every day, the daycare, start giving him food to give to his son because they want his son to have food made by mothers to feel that love, and he just says like, this is my grief, go away. you're not allowed to process your things, dumping it on me. So that was interesting. I would recommend this one. One that I'm not sure I recommend is The Book of Dust, the second volume, The Secret Commonwealth by Pulman. Talked about this world and these books regularly because I've been meaning to read this one for a while. The Book of Dust is a series that is both a prequel and a sequel to Historic Materials, and this one happens 10 years after Lyra has come back from her adventures, and her and Pan are in a falling out. She's been reading some books, and those make her kind of not trust imagination anymore and not believe in magic, the magic that is in their world. She doesn't really starts not believing in the secret Commonwealth, so things like fairies and whatnot, but some of these things she has seen. So Pan sees her changing and does not like it, so they clash, and he leaves her at one point and she has to start finding him. At the same time, there's this thing going on in the world with roses, and the roses can do something, and I'm still unsure. There are a lot more moving parts in the book than in Historic Materials. So Historic Materials, you had the Magisterium and Lyra, but in this one there are different people within the Magisterium, and there are different people fighting against it, and then there's people in between, and there's Lyra and Pantaleimon. I wasn't interested at all in that whole storyline of the roses, but this thing between Lyra and Pantaleimon and the influence of believing in the world, believing in fairies, witches, stuff. I thought that was interesting, and how I would be curious in seeing what Lyra does and like resolving, because this second book so obviously continues on in the third, resolving this, not really knowing who she is anymore, going in a direction that part of her also feels as this is not me. So that was interesting, but mixed feelings about this one. Mixed feelings. Now let me see, what else did I read? Oh yes, I read Dracula by Bram Stoker. Lots of fun, lots of fun. I buddy read it with Katja. I'll link her channel down below. It was great to buddy read it because it wasn't necessarily what we were expecting. There were a lot of things about gender in there. Dracula, it's about a vampire, but the vampire is hardly in the book. He's in there at the beginning and in the end, but that's about it. In the middle part, he's just this monster that the main characters want to make sure dies. It's about them realizing that Dracula, that there's a vampire, that there's a woman who the life has been sucked out of her. And then there's this very smart Dutch, I will talk about that, Dutch doctor that kind of know what's going on, so he is trying to save her, but at the same time he doesn't really tell the rest, and it's about them then trying to make sure that there are no vampires in the world, and this little group that starts fighting that. And the gender stuff was there's a lot. So there's two women in the book. One, her life is sucked away in the beginning, and then the other, well, she's smart, it's very manly. And it's all about, no, my poor Mrs. Mina, she has to see a terrible thing, so we will not tell her because we need to save her. And then, sorry for the noise, the women itself see themselves in that way. It's about there's this mother at one point that sees it, and one of those men that has had that doesn't look good is, you really need a woman in your life because then she can give you food. There was a lot of that, but the way it's written, it's very dramatic, so it was, the reading the gender stuff was hilarious. At least in the first half, I thought it was very entertaining, seeing all these little things, how it came back. But then the second half of the book started slowing down a little bit more. There was not as much action, and there's a lot of like behind the screens type of things that they do that like I don't really care that they've been typing all of their stories. It's an epistolary novel, so it's the letter from one to another and then the diary of yet another. But one of the things in the book is that they're collecting all of these things and making sure that everybody knows what. It's just not interesting. So the second half of the book, the gender stuff combined with the just a little bit snowish was less. I was less interested. I was happy for it to be over with, and then the ending was terrible. Honestly, I was, because the first half is so dramatic and fun, and it's, oh no, poor Mrs. Mina, and this black bat-like thing that happens to be sucking blood, and the ending was very, very anticlimactic. That was sad. Enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to watching some kind of adaptation that, preferably an older one, I think some kind of black and white thing that captures the dramatic, oh no, those poor women type of things, and we men are so manly. Oh, there's this section where the best thing happened because they needed blood for one of these women whose life was sucked out of her, and then luckily at that moment a young courageous man comes, and it's the blood of a young courageous man that wants to give his life to a woman was exactly what they needed. Like, there was nothing about the blood being AB, O negative, whatever. It was, no, the blood of a manly, courageous man. It was very, very funny. And it was a good one to buy at somebody read as well. Let me see, what else did I read? Ah, yes. I read Babel by RF Kuang. Great. Loved it. This one, it's dark academia. Now, I hate the term of that genre. I don't think the genre is big enough for it has to have its own name. But, you know, it's about these people that go studying and then become a group and start discovering things are going on. Now, it's fantasy, but it's very light fantasy, and it's about translation. The magic in the world happens because of the differences in translation between, if you have a word in one language, you will say, how am I going to explain this? I knew how to explain this. I keep telling people, I've been telling people about this book ever since I read it. But in one world, language, you will have a word. And if you translate it to another language, yes, it will mean the same thing, but there's often a little bit of nuance between the two, that one will have a nuance that the other one doesn't. And in this world, that is where the magic happens. So they try to find combinations of words between two languages, and then when you write both of them down and say it out loud, then the nuance is the magic that happens. So if you have in one language something that means warmth, and in the other it means warmth but also coziness, then the feeling of coziness will happen. And the thing is, that's where the interest is. This was already interesting in the book, but there's also this whole conversation about colonialism, and this whole conversation about how to fight colonialism and how to fight the power being, the people having the power just wanting to maintain the power, and what do you do against it. That was fascinating. That was great, because the Tower of Babel in the book, they have the power. They are the ones that hold the people that can translate. They hold all of the silver that is used for the magic. But they suck that away from the countries that are part of the Commonwealth, and they give nothing back. And that has lots of effects. So it's great. It is such a smart book. The characters were interesting. They were complex. They had layers. There were twists and turns. It was at the same time, it's rather, with the theme of colonialism, it's super interesting, but there's also plot that just makes you just wants to keep reading. I have no negatives. My only negatives, that is just a little bit too polished and a little bit too perfect. It didn't have rough edges, if you understand what I mean. Now, this book is going to be on a lot of people's favorite lists. I've been looking at other reviews by people and everyone's like, oh, everybody is raving about it, so you're probably going to hear a lot of people talk about it. The thing is, I don't really know, because it doesn't have these rough edges, I don't know if it's going to stand the passage of time. Discussion in it, very relevant, but I don't know, I'll be very curious to see that there's just this little thing that makes that it's not perfect. Rationally it's perfect, but emotionally it just misses a little thing, and I don't know what. But if you've read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm waiting to buy it when it's come out in the, you know, the traditional sized paperback, because yes, I thought it was great, and I'm looking forward to rereading it already in a couple of years and see what my thoughts about it are going to be then. And it has an opinion about violence that I'm now not entirely sure what I think about. So this isn't a great review about Babel, maybe, but so many people are going to talk about it, it's not really worth going more in depth. Talk to me if you've read it. That's maybe just my message. Now, I think those are all of the books that I've read. Because we've got the one DNF, we've got these. Yeah, I think so. I think those, it feels like I'm forgetting something. I have no idea what. I'll talk to you in the comments. I'm forgetting a book. Am I not forgetting a book? Let me just check my notes. I think I'm forgetting a book. No, I have the one DNF and the two for Invisible Cities. Yeah, okay, those were all the books. Maybe it's because I'm now already reading 3 other books. I don't know. Okay, I'm just gonna stop talking. I'll see you in another video. Bye bye.
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.